The rain hammered against the stained glass windows of Blackwood Manor like a frantic plea to be let inside. Inside the grand, dust-coated library, 4 strangers stared at a solitary, crimson-waxed envelope resting upon a mahogany table. There was Julian, a cynical antiquities dealer whose fingers perpetually smelled of old paper and copper coins. Lyra, a sharp-eyed investigative journalist chasing a ghost from her past. Master Alistair, an aging clockmaker with a mechanical left hand that clicked in the silence. And Vesper, an enigmatic, soft-spoken botanist who carried a leather satchel that seemed to pulse faintly with the scent of crushed nightshade. None of them knew each other. None of them knew who had gathered them. Julian broke the seal with an ivory letter opener, unfolding the thick parchment. Inside, written in jagged, frantic calligraphy, were words that sent a chill through the warm amber light of the hearth. The eclipse is upon us. The vault beneath the manor holds what you lost, what you fear, and what you crave. Find the 4 keys before the clock strikes midnight on the 3rd night. Trust no one, especially the dead. Before anyone could speak, the grandfather clock in the corner began to chime. Not 12 times, but 13. As the final echo faded, the heavy oak doors of the library slammed shut of their own accord, locking with a definitive, echoing click. The lights flickered, leaving them in a dim, suffocating twilight. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the fireplace, plunging the room into shadow. From the far corner, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound began, as if something buried beneath the floorboards was desperately trying to claw its way up into the room. Lyra reached for her flashlight, her hands trembling as she clicked the switch, casting a piercing beam across the terror-laden room. The flashlight beam cut through the heavy dust motes, illuminating not a terrifying monster, but an ornate, silver-plated key resting on a pedestal that had apparently risen from the floorboards. But before anyone could step forward, Vesper's quiet voice sliced through the tension. "Stop, look at the shadows on the wall." The 4 companions turned. Their shadows weren't following their movements. Instead, the silhouettes were peeling away from the plaster, stretching into long, clawed distortions that whispered unintelligible secrets. Julian stepped back, his eyes narrowing as an involuntary surge of energy pulsed through his palms. Without thinking, he thrust his hand forward, unleashing a wave of kinetic force that shattered the nearest window. The cold night air rushed in, and the bizarre shadow figures hissed, dissolving back into normal proportions. "What in the world was that?" Alistair muttered, his mechanical left hand spinning gears with a high-pitched whine as a protective field of blue energy flared around his fingertips, illuminating the workshop dust. "Not a normal house, that's for certain," Lyra said. Her eyes flashed with a sudden crimson gleam, a latent superpower that allowed her to see the thermal and emotional footprints left behind by whoever, or whatever, had set this trap. "There's a trail of fresh warmth heading toward the portrait gallery. Someone was just standing right behind us." Vesper knelt down, picking up the silver key with bare fingers that suddenly sprouted thorny, protective vines, shielding against a hidden trap in the pedestal. "The key is real," Vesper murmured, a faint, bioluminescent glow outlining their silhouette. "And it's reacting to our unique abilities. This place isn't just a prison, it's testing us." They exchanged wary glances. They possessed extraordinary gifts: telekinesis, technopathy, thermographic sight, and plant manipulation. Yet here, trapped inside Blackwood Manor, those powers felt less like an advantage and more like bait in a cosmic game. Moving as a tight unit, the 4 super-powered strangers stepped out of the library and into the vast, echoing expanse of the portrait gallery. Rows of grim ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes seemingly tracking every step. The air smelled of ozone, old varnish, and a strange, metallic tang of fresh rain. "Keep your guards up," Julian whispered, keeping his kinetic aura primed just beneath his skin. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward them like grasping fingers. As they walked past an enormous canvas depicting a stern Victorian lord, Lyra's crimson eyes caught a shimmering anomaly in the air. "Wait," she warned, stopping abruptly. "There's an invisible tripwire right ahead, pulsing with localized psychic energy. If we touch it, the whole gallery will seal shut. Alistair stepped forward, his mechanical hand transforming and shifting with a flurry of clicks as he interfaced directly with the brass floor plates. "Give me a second," he muttered, his eyes locked on the invisible energy grid. With a sharp twist of his wrist, he redirected the current into the wall sconces, causing the gas lamps to flare violently and burn away the psychic barrier in a burst of harmless white sparks. "Nicely done, old man," Julian remarked with a tight, nervous grin. "Let's not celebrate yet," Vesper countered. Down the corridor, the temperature plummeted instantly. Frost began to creep across the polished hardwood floors, freezing the edges of the heavy velvet drapes. From the darkness at the far end of the gallery, a soft, mocking chime echoed, the sound of a music box playing a warped, slowed-down lullaby. A pair of glowing, amber eyes materialized in the gloom, accompanied by the heavy, rhythmic thud of approaching footsteps. Something massive, ancient, and deeply malicious was hunting them down the hall, and the second key was mounted on a wall directly behind the approaching beast. The creature stepped into the moonlight filtering through the high clerestory windows, a monstrous amalgamation of shadow, bone, and jagged iron plating, standing nearly 8 feet tall. It let out a deafening roar that shook the paintings from their hooks. "Get the key," Julian shouted, throwing his hands forward. A violent blast of kinetic energy slammed into the creature's chest, sliding it back a few feet, but the beast barely flinched, its iron claws scraping viciously against the floor. "It's absorbing kinetic force," Alistair yelled, frantically adjusting the settings on his mechanical arm to project a blinding wall of high-frequency sonic resonance. The sound wave crashed over the monster, disorienting it and causing it to stumble. "Now, Vesper," Lyra called out. Vesper didn't hesitate. Slamming both hands onto the wooden floorboards, they commanded the ancient floor timbers to wake up. Thick, thorny briars and heavy wooden roots burst upward from the floor, wrapping tightly around the beast's limbs, anchoring it to the spot with immense pressure. Lyra sprinted past the struggling monster, her crimson vision pinpointing the exact mechanical lock holding the second key to the wall. With a swift leap, she pulled the key free just as the beast shattered Vesper's vines with a furious burst of dark energy. "We have it! Fall back!" Lyra yelled, tossing the key to Julian, who caught it deftly. They scrambled through a side door into a labyrinthine maze of servants' quarters, slamming the heavy iron-reinforced door behind them. They leaned against it, panting heavily, listening to the muffled, frustrated pounding of the beast echoing from the other side. "That was entirely too close," Julian muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "We are only halfway there," Alistair noted, examining his smoking mechanical hand. "And something tells me the puzzles are only going to get much more lethal from here on out." The servants' quarters gave way to a massive, subterranean workshop filled with ticking grandfather clocks, suspended pendulums, and intricate brass gear systems that spanned from floor to ceiling. In the center of the room stood a giant, multi-dialed vault door bearing the third keyhole. "A puzzle lock," Alistair murmured, his eyes lighting up with professional curiosity despite the peril. He stepped up to the massive brass mechanism, his mechanical hand instinctively clicking and whirring as he analyzed the interlocking gears. "This isn't just mechanical, it's tied to a temporal feedback loop. If I turn the wrong dial, it won't just lock, it will reset our timeline in this room by an hour." "Can you bypass it?" Vesper asked, keeping watch near the darkened doorway, their fingers absently caressing a small, glowing fern they had cultivated from a pocket pouch. "Give me time, but I need cover," Alistair said, sweat beading on his forehead as he began manipulating the primary dials. Suddenly, the mechanical clocks around the room began to chime simultaneously, their hands spinning backward with a frantic whir. The shadows in the corners of the workshop condensed, forming shifting, humanoid shapes that began to drift silently toward them. Phantoms of the past, or perhaps echoes of future victims. "They're coming through," Julian warned, his hands glowing with a bright, kinetic aura. He unleashed a series of concentrated concussive blasts, shattering the approaching phantoms into harmless dust, but more kept emerging from the clock faces. "Hurry, Alistair," Lyra urged, her thermal vision scanning the ceiling for structural weaknesses. "The ceiling supports are destabilizing from the temporal anomaly." "Almost. Got it," Alistair grunted. With a final, decisive click of his mechanical fingers, he pulled a hidden master lever. The massive vault door hissed as pressurized air released, swinging inward to reveal a pedestal bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light. Resting upon it was the third key, carved from a solid piece of crystalline meteorite. Alistair snatched the key just as the entire room shuddered violently. "Grab it and move," he shouted, leading the charge through the newly opened portal beyond the vault. They tumbled through the portal into what appeared to be an indoor greenhouse, though it was entirely overgrown with monstrous, bioluminescent flora. Thick, purple mist hung heavy in the air, smelling sweetly of vanilla and decay. The glass ceiling above was cracked, letting in the relentless midnight rain. "Watch your step," Vesper warned immediately, their voice dropping to a low, authoritative whisper. "These plants aren't normal, they're sentient, and they're hunting by scent." As if on cue, the vines around them rustled. Large, bulbous flowers turned their fleshy petals toward the group, dripping a caustic, acidic nectar onto the flagstones below, where it hissed and smoked. "Is there a way through without burning the whole place down?" Julian asked, keeping his kinetic shield active to deflect a spray of poisonous thorns fired from a nearby fern. "I can speak with them," Vesper replied calmly. Closing their eyes, they placed both palms flat against the mossy ground, sending a subtle, pulsing wave of green energy through the soil. For a moment, the hostile flora paused, their swaying stems freezing in place. Vesper's eyes flashed with a bright emerald light as they communicated through the silent, subterranean root network, negotiating safe passage through the deadly maze. "They'll let us pass," Vesper said, opening their eyes, "if we leave an offering of energy. They want a piece of our power to feed the final guardian." "A trade," Lyra said skeptically. "Do we trust them?" "We don't have a choice," Alistair pointed out, gesturing back toward the entrance where the spectral phantoms were beginning to filter through the doorway. Julian, Vesper, Alistair, and Lyra pooled a small fraction of their respective energies into the soil, feeding the root network. Instantly, the giant carnivorous blossoms parted, revealing a hidden altar at the far end of the greenhouse. Resting upon it was the fourth and final key, forged from pure, dark obsidian. Vesper stepped forward and retrieved the obsidian key, a triumphant glint in their eyes. But the moment the key was lifted, the greenhouse began to violently collapse inward, the glass shattering completely as the storm broke through. Guided by the four keys, silver, iron, crystalline, and obsidian, the group navigated a final, spiraling staircase that descended deep into the bedrock beneath Blackwood Manor. They emerged into a vast, circular chamber dominated by a massive stone monolith at its center. Above them, a vaulted oculus in the ceiling aligned perfectly with the blood-red moon breaking through the storm clouds, the eclipse. At the base of the monolith stood a figure draped in a heavy, tattered black cloak, their face hidden beneath a deep hood. "You made it," the figure said, their voice echoing strangely, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. "The four keys of the eclipse, brought together by four souls touched by the extraordinary." "Who are you?" Julian demanded, stepping forward with his hands crackling with kinetic fury, while Alistair primed his sonic defenses and Lyra scanned for hidden traps. The figure slowly lowered their hood, revealing a face that wasn't entirely human, features lined with faint, glowing runes and eyes that mirrored the starry night sky. "I am the warden of this threshold. Blackwood Manor is not a prison, it is a gateway. For decades, the boundary between our world and the realm of shadows has worn thin. Only those with supernatural gifts, tested by trial, could unlock the seal and restore the balance." "And if we refuse?" Vesper asked, holding the obsidian key tightly. "Then the gateway shatters completely, and what lies beyond will consume this entire city," The warden replied calmly, extending a hand toward the central monolith. Place the 4 keys into the altar. Let the eclipse complete its cycle. The 4 companions looked at one another. They had been dragged into this nightmare as strangers, hunted by beasts and tested by puzzles, but now the fate of everything rested in their combined hands. With a silent nod of agreement, they stepped up to the monolith together. Julian inserted the silver key. Alistair fitted the iron key into its slot. Vesper placed the crystalline key, and Lyra locked the obsidian key into the center mechanism. For a tense second, absolute silence gripped the cavernous chamber. Then, the 4 keys began to hum with intense, synchronized energy. Streams of brilliant white, blue, green, and crimson light shot upward from the altar, converging into a dazzling beam that pierced straight through the oculus in the ceiling, meeting the blood-red moon above. The ground shook beneath their feet, not with the violence of a collapse, but with the steady, reassuring thrum of a newly sealed barrier. The shadowy figures and lingering malice in the air dissolved like mist under the morning sun. The cloaked warden smiled faintly, bowing low before fading entirely into a swirl of stardust. The seal is restored. You have chosen well. As the crimson light of the eclipse faded into the soft, golden hues of actual dawn, the heavy stone doors of the chamber slowly rolled open, revealing a path leading out of the subterranean depths and back into the normal world. Exhausted, battered, yet undeniably triumphant, Julian, Lyra, Alistair, and Vesper stepped out of the manor and into the crisp morning air. They had entered the estate as isolated individuals harboring secrets and burdens, but as they looked at the rising sun, they realized something profound. Their strange abilities were no longer a curse to hide, but the foundation of an unbreakable bond. Julian pocketed a small souvenir coin he'd found. Lyra smiled warmly. Alistair adjusted his mechanical cuff with a satisfied click, and Vesper let a small, vibrant flower bloom from their palm. Their journey into the dark was over, but their story, as a team, was only just beginning.